Hey, so I just wanted to make one more video wrapping up 2024 within the UFC, and my last video was the best of the UFC in 2024. This is going to be the opposite. This is going to be the worst of the UFC in 2024. You see, we've got Vitor Petrino here, we've got Tai Tuivasa, so let's get right into it. No offense to any of these fighters, just bad things happened to them this year. Alright, so first we're going to do like we did last time. We're going to have two worst fighters of the year. We're going to have worst champion of the year and worst contender of the year. So let's start with the champion. You guys see him there, Leon Edwards. Honestly, 2024 was a pretty good year for champions. We didn't have all that much switching of champions, so that made it a pretty easy choice to choose Leon Edwards for this award. So there you go, Leon Edwards. You're the worst champion of the year, unfortunately. And I don't mind Leon Edwards. I like Leon Edwards, but I think this is a pretty easy one. Out of the champions that changed this year, there were only a few. And Leon Edwards by far had the worst loss out of all of these guys, right? He got dominated by Bilal over 5 rounds. Now, he did have competitive moments in that fight. He had moments where he took the back, where he was successful in the grappling. Surprisingly, the striking barely did anything for him, which I think was disappointing from him. He was telling his coaches to F off, I believe, in the corner, which is not a good look at all. No, he's telling them to shut up in the corner. That's not good. Not good at all. So I think a lot of the problem in that fight was mentality. He wasn't looking to engage. Obviously, Bilal's a great fighter. Even a high-level guy like Leon Edwards is going to have a lot of problems with him. But I feel like there's just things he could have done that he chose not to do to get the striking going, right? He could have went for these. You always see these training videos where he's clinching up, hitting nasty elbows and knees. But when do we ever see that in a Leon Edwards fight, right? At least recently, we never see that. And after he lost his belt, man, things have kind of gone downhill for him. Nobody talks about him. He's not a guy that's a hyped up contender now. Even guys like Joaquin Buckley, when he called him out at his performance against Colby Covington, he wanted the crowd to scream for which person they wanted him to face. Man, nobody was screaming for Leon Edwards. It's sad for him because Kamaru Usman is much bigger of a name at this point, even though he's coming off 3 losses, two of them actually, to Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards is the most recent champion, aside from Bilal, and he's really gone irrelevant, right? So part of this that I want to include in this pick of worst is it's not just what happens in the fights, it's what happens surrounding the fights. And we'll talk about that more going into the next choice. But yeah, Leon Edwards has had a rough year. Still relatively young, 33, 34. Still pretty close to his prime, right? He's still a very skilled guy. I'm just not sure that he has that, especially at welterweight right now. His next fight is gonna be a guy like Ian Gary, maybe a Shavkat, maybe a Bilal again somehow, maybe a JDM, maybe a Carlos Prates. Whoever it is going to be a tough guy. It's going to be a pretty well-rounded guy, and there's not going to be any easy wins at the top of welterweight right now. So I'm a bit worried for Leon Edwards. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back, loses his next fight, and takes another long layoff. It's just not looking good for him right now. I hope he's able to turn it around, but for now, definitely the worst year for any champion. All right, and then next we've got the worst fighter of the year contender award, and that is unfortunately going to have to go to Jamahal HIll. Now, people might say he only lost once this year. There are guys that lost 2 times this year, but I think that one loss is about as bad as a loss as you can take, especially given everything that surrounded that loss. Now, obviously, UFC 300, massive main event, one of the biggest spotlights of the year on that. And man, he got embarrassed by Alex Pereira. And man, he's taken it badly, right? So let's talk about the fight itself. Honestly, it was perceived as a super competitive fight going into it. I was worried about Alex Pereira. A lot of people were. Even though I'd probably say it was like 60-40, 70-30, picking Pereira to win this one. But it was definitely considered a very competitive, dangerous fight. I'm not sure that Jamahal HIll landed anything dangerous in that fight. which is not a good look because Yuri lands on Pereira, Blachowicz lands on Pereira, Khalil Roundtree lands on Pereira, and now these are all great strikers too, but Jamahal Hill was supposed to be the guy that's maybe the most dangerous striker Pereira had fought at light heavyweight until that point, but no, Pereira shut him down, knocked him out pretty badly. Not out cold, but enough that, yeah, stopped that fight, Got him with the left hook, and Jamal complained about the groin shot, obviously. And everyone knows that that is not a valid complaint, right? Everybody saw the glove touch, thumbs up. Jamahal Hill steps forward, throws the first strike, gets countered, goes down. And after that is probably when the worst happened for him, because he could have just taken that loss and continued, got right back in there, fought another guy. And I know he was attempting to. He was going to fight. Oh, man, it was that co-main event that changed so many times and ended up being Anthony Smith. But he was going to fight, not Olberg, I believe. Somebody like that. I forget exactly who. Oh, he was going to fight Khalil Roundtree at one point, I believe. That might have been better for him, right? If he was able to get that win back, get some respect back, but no. Instead, he sat on the sidelines, made a bunch of videos, made a bunch of angry tweets, talking about how he got cheated, how he's still the best in the division. And then, obviously, he had that recent encounter with Pereira in the gym, where he refused to get in the ring with him after approaching. That did not look good for him either. And so, this year, Jamahal Hill went from a guy that a lot of people saw as maybe a rightful champ, right? I mean, Pereira was obviously a rightful champ, but Jamahal Hill was definitely the rightful champ at the time when he relinquished the belt, and he hadn't lost since then. He was seen as a great challenger for Alex Pereira, and now he's a bit of a joke, unfortunately. Although he's still a really good fighter, I think he still has a really good shot against Yuri at UFC 311, which will be fun to see. He might have lost the most stock anybody ever has in one performance. He got embarrassed at UFC 300, and he's been getting embarrassed just about every day since then. His stock has fallen so much. Poor Jamahal Hill brought a lot of it upon himself. Let's move on. Worst rookie of the year. And this one hurts, right? Because this is a guy that made his debut in 2024 and got a knockout against Josh Parisian, I believe, within 15, 20 seconds. He missed a head kick, fell down. I've noticed that every fight he comes out with some sort of wild head kick or body kick, and it works out a lot of the time, right? Coming into the UFC, he was on he had one first round finish near the end of the first round, and then other than that, they were within the first 15 seconds, which is ridiculous. I was so excited for this guy coming into the division, especially after his debut, where he had that 20-second knockout, comes out, moves around a little bit, misses a head kick, falls down, and knocks the guy out. I believe it was Josh Parisian, a fat guy. Knocks him out as he's stumbling around trying to stand back up. Just a ridiculous power from this guy, ridiculous accuracy. And I was excited. He got accelerated up the rankings against Waldo Cortez Acosta, who's not a grappler, really. Just a bit more well-rounded. And oh my God, he just grappled this guy to no end, right? And a lot of his hype just died right there when we see that this guy doesn't even have amateur level grappling. He doesn't even have white belt level grappling. His grappling looks like a guy who's never trained grappling a day in his life, which is ridiculous, man. Come on. You know you're going to be fighting MMA, right? It's all good to keep your striking tools sharp. But when you make that switch from Taekwondo to MMA, like this bronze medal Taekwondo athlete did, 6'7", ridiculous frame, ridiculous reach, and this guy can't be bothered to spend a couple hours on the mats every day, it seems. I don't know, man. And then after that, loses to Austin Lane via grappling again. This is Austin Lane and Waldo Cortez Acosta. This is not Tom Aspinall, right? This is not Brock Lesnar. This is not even Francis Ngannou on the ground. This is not even Shamil Gaziev on the ground. These are the worst of the worst heavyweight grapplers, and Robelis is making these guys look like black belts on the ground. Disgusting, man. And to make it even worse, a couple days ago, or yesterday was that Karate Combat 4-second KO. This guy could have been what we needed in the UFC heavyweight division. I know I've talked about that division a lot, how we lack prospects. This was just salt in the wound. So yeah, Robelis Despaigne, unfortunately, you are the worst rookie of the year. Let's move on. Okay, so we had the KO of the year. This one is going to be the KO'd of the year. Who took the nastiest KO? Terrence McKinney was up there. Alexander Volkanovski was up there. But I didn't want to make it, obviously, for the KO of the year. I chose Topuria's KO over Volk. And I didn't want to use the same one. Plus, I feel bad for Volk. I like that guy a lot. So we're going to go with Bernardo Sopaj, KO'd by Vinicius Oliveira with a flying knee. Man, that was nasty. One of those ragdoll out-cold KOs. And that was extremely unfortunate because Bernardo Sopaj himself is a great, great talent in MMA, right? I believe he's 24, 25, really well-rounded guy, really fun striker. That fight with Vinicius Oliveira, who I do think is an elite-level striking prospect, was extremely competitive on the feet. Sopaj was able to mix in some of the grappling. And yeah, I think Vinicius was winning it, but it was close. And man, he got put down bad in that third round. Nasty, folded over himself, took a while to come back. And that's never what you want to see, especially for a young guy just starting their UFC career. But I still think this is a really talented guy that's going to be able to bounce back from that, right? Hopefully learn something from it, although his brain probably doesn't work as well as it did before, unfortunately. But you can still learn, I suppose. Poor Bernardo Sopaj. It's a guy I like, a guy I'm supporting a lot going forward. But unfortunately, we're going to have to give him KO'd of the year. All right. And then this is one I want to talk about. Worst performance of the year. Now, I was considering putting the Mario Bautista versus Jose Aldo just because that one got so much press, right? That was such a publicized one. So many people were angry about that. But I think that why is Kron Gracie getting an excuse to be awful even in the grappling because of his last name, right? I feel like people tend to give this guy permission to be bad because he's a Gracie. But why are you giving a Gracie permission to be bad even on the ground? I would kind of understand if this guy was like a Ben Askren in the striking, which he is. But, oh man, as soon as it gets to the ground, you better watch out. You better keep those arms tucked in, right? You better not let him get that heel hook. But no, this guy was grappling with Bryce Mitchell, who's obviously a good grappler, right? Aside from one decent armbar attempt, what else did this guy even attempt in that whole 15 minutes almost? Most of it on the ground with Bryce Mitchell. What? This guy didn't throw up a single triangle attempt. This guy wasn't trying to get any Kimuras from bottom. He had that one pretty good armbar, but Bryce Mitchell was able to fight out of that pretty easily. And this guy, man, I don't even like his face. He was just laying there on his back like he was too cool to be there, right? Which is ridiculous because this guy has earned nothing in the UFC, right? He has no status within the UFC aside from being a Gracie. He has no fan favoritism. And it just disgusts me how this guy does nothing in the striking, does nothing in the grappling, and somehow people are still making fights for him. Somehow Dana White, the UFC, is putting this guy on the main card of a pay-per-view in 2024 when this guy has no way to win fights, right? How can grappling be your way to win fights? And then when you're on the ground, on your back, which isn't an ideal position, but when you're a jiu-jitsu guy who definitely does a lot of training with submissions from guard, how are you not attempting more than one submission from guard, right? How do you look absolutely useless on the ground and on the feet? So for worst performance of the year, we're giving that to Kron Gracie against Bryce Mitchell. This is a guy that I never want to see fight again. This is a guy that probably deserves to be cut from the UFC. Probably never deserves to have another MMA fight. Maybe he can go to college, get a degree, do something else, man. Fighting's not for you. All right, and then here we are going to honor the hatred for the Mario Bautista versus Jose Aldo fight. worst fight of the year, I'll give it to it. Now, for me, a factor that goes into the worst fight of the year is what I call like the frustration factor. When a guy that you want to see get a KO, do well, is being stopped from doing that by something that's not like. Let's talk about something else. So let's talk about like the Renato Moicano versus Benoit Saint Denis fight. I like Moicano. I like Benoit Saint Denis. I was kind of hoping to see Benoit Saint Denis do something good in the striking, right? But I wasn't feeling the frustration when Moicano was on top of him beating him up. Because like when it's a fight like that, when it's a guy like Renato Moicano on top of you, cutting you up with nasty ground and pound and elbows, that's not frustrating because that feels like you're watching the fight. The guy that deserves to be winning is winning. What is frustrating is when you want Jose Aldo to really put it on this guy, Mario Bautista, in the striking, but he's not able to. And it's not because Mario Bautista is on top of him on the ground, going for submission, landing nasty ground and pound. It's because Mario Bautista is holding him by the waist, holding him by the underhooks, and just pressing him against the cage, doing no damage, rubbing his little lips on his stomach. I don't know. But it's just frustrating. And for me, that's what makes the worst fight of the year. Frustration. Nothing ever happens. It's kind of how I felt about the Merab versus Petr Yan fight, but this is much worse because at least Merab is resetting, right? He's going back to the striking and back to the takedown. Mario Bautista just, it's like he's in that between ground, between the striking and the takedown, the clinch, obviously. But it's even between the clinch and between the takedown because it's not a clinch that you can land strikes from, and it's not even a clinch that you're threatening a takedown. It's just that smudge grappling, the worst style in the UFC, and it gave us the worst fight of the year from a guy that is supposed to be primarily a striker in Mario Bautista, and a guy that's much younger than Jose Aldo. It's just not good, not a good performance, honestly, from either guy, because obviously Jose Aldo gets a lot of excuses for this because he did want to engage in the striking, but an ideal performance from him, from Jose Aldo, would have been able to really push that guy off you and make the striking count when you can get it. But most of the blame for this being an awful, awful fight, the worst of the year, is going to go to Mario Bautista. And I believe that wraps up this video. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to try to get out one more video before Christmas, maybe about the Tyson Fury fight if you guys are into that. And yeah, thanks for watching. Have a Merry Christmas, guys.